Hi, my name is Yandia and I'm here with Megan to talk to you about self-love and being mindful about money, helping you to make the right decisions today that will lead you to the future that you want.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan and I'm here to talk to you today about some financial skills and some financial knowledge to help you build a great financial future for yourself.
When we're looking at feeling that self-worth, to be able to save, sometimes we really have to dig deep. Everything that ever ends up big and beautiful starts small, right? Like take, for example, a big, beautiful tree full of, apples and so luscious and abundant. It starts from a seed, right? So even in nature, we get like basic concepts about starting off with small things. And we should always look at our own hearts, our own selves, and kind of figure out, why do I not feel like I should even start off with something small? Being consistent with it, we're training and teaching ourselves that with consistency, even small things, small savings could add up to big things to accomplish our goals.
When we're looking at how people are saving and how people are trying to accumulate wealth for themselves and a stable financial future, even if you save $1 or $10 per week, it all adds up.
Definitely.
And what's really important, there's 4 key things. If you're able to save even $5 a week, number one, And I think that that's a key part is you've tracked it. You can understand that. So if you actually know that you've been able to save some money, that's terrific. The other thing is that you haven't gone into deficit. And so as much as we think $1 or $2 isn't very much, that's a huge difference from being negative $100 a week or negative $50 a week. So pat yourself on the back. The other thing that's important is that it grows, and you can always add to that. Once you've got the habit to save $1 or $10 a week, that can grow to 20 or 30. And if we're saving $10 a week, sometimes you're like, oh, a couple of coffees. It's $520 a year. That's a terrific amount of money for you to be able to get a really solid base for yourself to start from. Sometimes when we see things from the outside, it looks like, oh, wow, that person has a lot of money. They must have done 2 or 3 great things.
That's right.
And the reality is most financial success and most financial stability comes from those little things you talk about. To use actually athletes as an example, one of my favorite athletes is Usain Bolt. And I see him every 4 years at the Olympics and he wins everything. And his race is, 9 seconds long. And it's not about him doing great things for those 9 seconds. It's what he does in those 4 years. He has a schedule, I'm sure, for eating. I'm sure he has a schedule for sleeping. And he has got that all timed out, all those little tiny things work out. So in those 9 seconds, he's got it.
That's right.
And that's how we need to approach money. It's not that once every 4 years thing. It's those little tiny things. And that's how people accumulate wealth. What are you setting your future self up for? Sometimes it's $1 or $2, but when that becomes $50, when that becomes $100, when that becomes $1,000, you feel fantastic.
When we're talking about self-love, we always tend to put the bills and everything else before ourselves, and we leave the little bit back for ourselves. I really feel like in today's society, we've learned that almost everything else is more important than us. And especially when it comes to finances, it's all about, get the job, to have this, to have that. And it's always about paying everybody else, right? The mortgage, the car, every single thing you're gonna get in life, that money is always gonna continually go towards others. So what about our dreams and goals? Right? What about the things we actually want to accomplish for ourselves? Isn't that important, right? So I think saving on a whole, we need to have that clear vision, right? Why are we doing this, right? What is it that we want from this in general? And then have our own dreams and goals very clear, and so we could start that process and have that inward motivation to keep with that consistency, to save even when we don't want to.
I think the thing is, when we don't want to. A lot of people struggle, and I think what's interesting is, finances is in money, and money are numbers, so you can measure it. So it's easy to understand how close you are to get there. And if you have a bad week, it's okay. You can, try and correct it the next week. It's very easy to create that money profile with numbers to say, where am I? How close did I get to my goal? And making sure that even if you save $1, maybe it's $10, but you're getting closer. It's a lot better to be 80% to your goal than 0. So today, I think too, it's important that we talk about the power of the dollar when we're looking at savings and the power that we have within us. And a lot of that power comes from time, the important connection between money and time. And in finance, we have a term called the time value of money. And to explain the power of the dollar and how time factors into it, we'll talk about two people. One of them is Sarah, and she decides to start saving early. And she saves $100 a week from the time she's 20 until the time she's 25. So when she's 25, she's saved $25,000.
Wow, yeah.
And then she invests it from the time she's 25 to the time she's 65. Tim does another approach. He doesn't save from the time he's 20 to 25, but at 25 he starts saving, great job, and he saves $2,000 a year from the time he's 25 to the time that he's 65. Now they both make the same types of investments, they have the same amount of return, and the same percentage of taxation. Where do they get at 65 when they both stop? Well, Tim has over $600,000, which is terrific. But Sarah, who only invested $25,000, actually ends up with almost $850,000. And it's because she started early.
That's right.
And that time value of money is very powerful. And so when we're looking at dollars in our pocket at 20, 25, and 30, don't view your savings as just that $1.
That's right.
View it as that $1,000, that $2,000 that it can snowball into. The reverse is true, unfortunately. When we're looking at debt that gets out of hand, the same snowball starts to take shape.
Oftentimes when we speak with younger people, we tend to tell them, the importance of saving. And they just think like, yeah, when I get older, I'll start that. That example that you just gave there is actually, it's ideal just to be able to break down and to show them exactly the power of their dollar in the future. And I feel like a lot of parents, we may tell our children, save the money, but we don't talk to them about the future value of that money.
The future value is so important, and I think people, when they're making financial choices, they often think that those future choices are so far down the road. And often when I use the example of Sarah, and people are like, well, I could never save $25,000 by 25, but then I ask the question, well, if you're going off to school, are you trying to get as much scholarships and bursaries as you can? Because if you take on $40,000 in debt for school versus 15, that's a $25,000 difference, which means you just made an $850,000 decision at the age of 24.
Also compounding interest, because when we talk about the value of money over time, it's the most powerful force in the world. And a lot of us don't talk to our children, or just people in general, actually, not just children, just even adults. They don't understand the difference with if you're gonna, save your money just in your piggy bank, if you're gonna save your money in a certain account, right, that may give you 5% interest or so on. So when we're looking at saving money over time, there is a big difference in just keeping money under your mattress or in a piggy bank and finding a proper investment vehicle.
A lot of people, when they're trying to understand investing, I say the primary thing to look at is how much risk are you taking on versus the potential reward. One of the biggest red flags for me is when someone says, oh, I've got this high return, low risk investment. No, doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
That's right.
And to set yourself up for an investing future that's positive, I always say there's 4 things to look at. One is fees. So Canadians pay the highest fees on investments in the world, and we do not have better outcomes. So it's very important to start to understand when you're getting an investment with somebody, you are purchasing something. So find out and ask questions. Who's getting paid here? What are they getting paid? What's the percentage? And have full disclosure. If someone doesn't want to tell you, that's generally not someone you want to invest with.
Red flag.
And so our goal is usually looking for investments for the most part, especially when you're starting out, with lower than 1% fees. If you're paying over 1%, you're probably looking at something that's a bit more expensive. The second thing to actually look at when it comes to investing is the taxes. I think it's really important that Canadians understand when you're having an investment where it gets taxed and the different methods that it can be taxed in, just generally. And the other side is, in Canada, we do have options for things to put your investment into. So not the investment itself, but little buckets and baskets we can put them into that protects it from paying taxes. The more you understand your taxes, the more you have an ability to decide which type of tax help help
That's right.
your investment can have. The other thing to look at with that is understanding that risk component.
Right.
So how much risk am I comfortable with?
Right.
What's the expected return? And don't do it with rose-colored glasses. Sometimes people go into it and they're usually on one of the extreme, which is, I don't want to take on any risk. And you got to take on a little bit of risk. Having a return that's below 1% doesn't help you with your future. You need to get the 3 and 4% range at least. The other side that you're looking at long term is when somebody's showing you investments that have very high rates of return, guaranteed. They're saying, oh, you'll definitely make 10, 20%. That's probably something that's a bit risky. You can do that as part of your investment portfolio, but when you look at the whole package, that's a lot. The last thing I always encourage people to do from the investing perspective is knowledge. Is we don't want to start investing and start our knowledge journey on investing at the same time.
No.
It starts well before, and you slowly want to build up that knowledge. And we can do that quite easily. One, from just going to the library, there's some investing books, and focus on things that would kind of equate, I say, to a textbook where you're starting to understand the language. The other thing that's great to do is to watch the business channels. Start to get used to the lingo. The language that the capital markets function in can be very confusing for people, but it's actually quite simple language. They just have weird terms. If you're growing your knowledge from somebody who's selling you products, I always say to have a bit of caution. Take with what they say with a grain of salt. When you're in areas where someone's just imparting knowledge, that's usually a better judge of the value of that knowledge. Something else you can look for is if you see someone who's talking about one type of investment is the way to go or one type of structure, just Google the opposite. And so you can get a good perspective. Well, a lot of people are saying this, but what's the opposite? And you should be looking to grow your investing knowledge over time well before you decide to start investing. I think when it comes to investing, a lot of people, if they didn't grow up in a family that invested, or if they grew up in a family that might have invested but never talked about it, it's very difficult to figure out where to start. And I think when we're looking at different types of investments and places to start, you definitely need to save for your future self to have a little bit of a cushion, some savings for an emergency. That can be 1 to 3 months of expenses. What's the minimum amount you need to get by? That's always good to have on hand. Once you've got that done, when you have $1,000, $2,000, you can start to look at the investing world. A primary function of an investment is that we're being paid to take on risk. So we're looking at it, an investment. Your number one thing is, what am I actually being paid to take on? What's the risk here? Is it one stock of one company that works in one sector, and I know that it's going to be driven by sales? Is it a bond that has to do with the debt of an oil and gas company? So I'm going to be fluctuating with that. What's the risk here? And what's the opportunity? The other thing to look at is, what are the fees that I'm paying to get into this investment? How high is it as a percentage? And am I expected to pay that when I buy it and when I sell it? Or am I paying fees every single year to own it? And then I'm also looking at the structure of it. Some investments are actually an investment in multiple things. That's an index fund, an ETF. Some of those things are a collection of things organized at an even percentage. So I've got a basket of 10 things where everything represents 10%. Other baskets are actually 80% of one thing and 20% of 45 others. It's a very different metric of what I'm looking at. So I always want to know, is there diversity here? And if there's not, how else can I achieve diversity? We always want diversity when we're starting out because we want to have the best chance of success. And the best chance of success is spreading it around. If it works out in one area, great. If we have one that doesn't go so well, over time, we're always moving the amount of money we have forward.
My grandmother used to say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I mean, there are so many phrases and stuff that we may have heard growing up. And then when we get into this investment world, it's right there. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. It's the best way to be.
And I would say too that sometimes when we take on risk, if it happens to work out in the short term, let's say you find that next big stock and you go out and you buy it, it might shoot up in the next month and you feel like a genius. Stocks have two directions. They can go up and they go down. People create these very wonky theories as to why they were right. The reality is it was a flip of a coin. So we always want to temper our emotions and temper our successes and say, as a whole, did the risk that we have equate the reward that we received.
So many times people are looking for that next big thing, you know, what we call timing the market. But it's not really timing the market, it's your time in the market.
That's right.
So you want to spend a longer time, because when you start investing, your investment is up and then it's down, and people get very afraid, right, when they see that they may be losing money. But this is life. Don't every single second be watching what's happening to your investment, because you may get, you know, some heart palpitations, because investments are made to go up and go down. They will move with the market, right? The important thing is that you choose something that's sturdy, that's needed, that's long-term, and something that you could stay and ride that current with.
I think one of the powerful things that we often need to discuss is about the power of that $1 and the power of $5 in our pocket, and how we can turn that into something great for our future self. Often when we're looking at that, we do focus on the time value of money and looking at the power of $1 to turn into 3 in the future, turn into 4. I also look at it from my daily spending, and every dollar that comes into my account, I assign it a job. Sometimes a dollar has a job to pay the rent. Sometimes that dollar has a job to pay that car payment. And sometimes that dollar's job is to turn into $3 or $10 for my future self. That's how you need to view your dollars.
Good habits versus bad habits, right? You look at your bad habits and see how it's really like draining your finances from you. And again, looking at our goals and our dreams, right? How do you see yourself in the future? Do you see those bad habits as part of your future? And if not, how could you take that and transforming it to be something now that's going to be beneficial for yourself, right? So maybe let's say someone has a habit of smoking. Well, you don't see yourself in the future maybe with like lung cancer or any of the other things that may be a negative, side effect from smoking. So what can you do to help you turn that bad habit into something that's going to help you accomplish your dreams and goals? Maybe every time you want to purchase a box of cigarettes, however much that's going to cost you, you pretend like you are purchasing the cigarettes instead. Let's say if it costs you $10 for, I actually don't know how much cigarettes cost, but let's say it costs you $10 for a box, right? You take that $10 and you put it into your savings account. Every habit that is a negative habit, you're gonna take that amount and instead of purchasing, just put that exact amount into your savings. Not only these finances towards your future, but you're actually decreasing something in your life that you don't like.
When you've got a good setup and you're diverting, negative habits to positive ones, over time, once you've made that shift, it becomes easy.
Exactly.
I think when we're looking at new habits from the outside, it always feels scary or hard or difficult. And the reality is when you have a good structure and a good setup for yourself, it's easy to make good, healthy choices. It's easier to make big financial decisions. All of that becomes a lot more automatic. We can automate sometimes moving money on a monthly basis from our checking account to a savings account. It's really important to make this active saving as easy as we can.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really important. So when it comes to credit, that is how financial institutions or any sort of program that is going to provide you for something without paying for it up front is looking to assess how much money they're going to lend you in some capacity. That could be as simple as when you're going to purchase a couch on credit, you're looking to get credit cards, maybe get a mortgage because you want to buy a house. You have what's called a credit score. And that starts for you whether you know it or not. And there's sort of 3 groups of people. There's people who have good credit, there's people who have no credit, and there's people who have bad credit. Unfortunately, people who have bad credit and people who have very little data in the system are lumped together. So sometimes you function in the place where you've done negative things to your credit, and sometimes you just haven't done very much
at all.
But you're lumped in there. Areas where you get credit isn't just from financial products. Even having a bank account, or if you're at a credit union, that actually starts a credit score of some type. Your income level is a big generator for your credit. Your education level impacts your credit. So if you're a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, you have that credential, that increases your credit score. What also impacts it though is day-to-day things like, or on a monthly basis, are you paying your utility bills on time? Are you making your cell phone payments on time? If you have debt products, like let's say a car loan, are you making those payments? And all of those things function together in these sort of back-end equations to produce a credit score. Where the market is not perfect is that if you're an Indigenous person and you live in your home community and you're making your utility payments to the local nation, that is not registering.
It's not recorded, that's right.
So there's a lot of areas where it's definitely not a perfect system, but it's a very much used system. So you kind of have to understand those different areas. Definitely getting a credit card when you're 18, 19 years old and paying it off every month is one way that people do try and boost their credit score. The negative to that is most people get a credit card very early, max it out, and don't pay it, and then harm their credit.
A very simple way for people to build their credit when they have bad credit and no credit is even just to get a secured credit card, right? So you could
Great idea.
Yeah, so if you have you've saved up that $500, right, from your bad habits or whatever the case is, you could actually take that $500 and go to an institution, right? You can say to them, I would like to have a secured credit card, and they would be giving you a credit card with your $500. So you're not lending the money from them. You're not borrowing the money from them. You're actually giving your own $500, and you'd be using that money, which is your money, but you're able to get the benefits, right, of using it as a credit card. And some people may even be thinking, where do I find out about my credit, right? Some places you do have to pay, I think Equifax you'd have to pay for. I know Credit Karma is free of charge.
Terrific.
Yeah, and you could go on there and see the whole breakdown of your credit history.
One of the big parts of people's financial story is often debt. When we're looking at debt, there's definitely good debt and bad debt, but there's two parts of it. One is what the debt's actually used for. And that one, when we look at what's good debt and what's bad debt, I would say good debt is something that has value after you've taken on the debt. So education, that increases our income. Things that kind of get murky sometimes are houses and cars, because we can take on those things and they can be good. We need a vehicle for transportation. We need a house to live in. But did we take on an appropriate amount for our income? When we get into easier things to discern as negative would be taking on debt to go on vacation. Or to buy clothes. There's really little value to it once you've purchased it. Those are things that are very difficult. Where people get in a really tight spot is when they're taking on debt just to pay their monthly expenses. The other aspect of the debt that's important to understand is what's the method that you're using to take on the debt? And the method is some form of loan or credit product, and that also has two parts to it. One, it has the interest rates, the amount of interest on an annual basis you're being charged, and the other one is the length of time, so the term of that. And what we're looking for is the length of the term to match with the type of asset that we're acquiring. So getting a mortgage for a house over 20 years is terrific. Getting a 40 or a 50-year mortgage, very risky. So we're looking for terms that are matching what we're doing, and we're also looking for the lowest interest rate that we can that also matches what we're doing. And that brings us to another topic that people often have a lot of anxiety about, and it's something that is very pervasive in our financial world, and that's payday lending. There's a lot of people that use that as their main source of banking. It's very difficult to get out of that cycle. And there's a reason. There's a very technical reason with what those institutions are doing. Well, when you take on a payday loan, sometimes they'll advertise it to you, $300 for $30. And you're like, that's 10%. However, it's 10% over 2 weeks. So if we actually take that $30 and multiply it by 26, because we actually have to get it over 52 weeks, what do we have? We have a 260% interest rate.
That's right.
That's a phenomenal interest rate. There is nothing that you could do on the saving or investing side to outrun that debt snowball you've created for yourself. There's just nothing you can do, and it can snowball so quickly. And that 260% is such a shocking number, but that's what we want to look at when we're analyzing different financial options. What's the annual interest rate? What's the length of the term? Can I afford this? And I would say that whenever you're not sure what to do, try your best to look at the math. What we want to do is find financial groups and financial institutions that are aligned with us. Where when they make money, it's okay because I'm still making money. When we're looking at things like payday lending, that's predatory. There's nothing I can do to be beneficial in that relationship, and it's something to avoid.
We have to remember that our debt is their asset. So they're not going to be trying to assist us to really get rid of that debt anytime soon, because the more debt they give you, the bigger asset it is for them. When we look at getting out of maybe poverty or getting into better financial situations, what is good debt versus bad debt, I like to always think of, how can I make more money? Bad debt is a debt that I can't make money off of. Good debt, anything I could make money off of, it's good. And if you look at people who are really wealthy, they do take on a lot of debt, but the reason they take it on is because they know the money that they can make from that debt far outweighs the debt that they're taking on. So if you were gonna look to get a car, what can you use that car for? Can you do Uber with it? Think of making money with that car, so it's gonna lessen the amount that you're actually putting towards the car debt-wise, right? A house, you want to buy a house, are you going to rent out the basement? Can you rent out a room? Can you rent out the space once a week for someone to use it for their small business? What can you do to make money off of that debt? There are many ways that we can lower our debt and increase that income, right? Always think of, how can I make money on this thing that I'm gonna be taking onto myself? Is this really working for me or against me? It's all about self-love.
One thing that I would like people to look at is when you're looking at different financial institutions, especially ones that deal both with the debt products plus the investing products, is look at what they're offering you in terms of the rate of the debt and the rate of the investment.
Yes.
And what happens with wealthy people is, like right now, they can get a mortgage at like 2.5%, and the institution's offering them an investment of around 5%.
Yeah.
What happens with low income people is they get the savings rate of below 1% and the debt at 15%. So it's reversed. And what you're looking for from a good financial institution is how close are those numbers. Ideally, the investment one is higher than the debt one. And if it's not currently for you because of your income or because of your current financial state, do they have a plan that will help get you there? And if they don't have that, sometimes that's a good sign that maybe that institution isn't aligned with where you're trying to go. If you've already engaged in some financial behavior that has led you to a place that you're not doing very well, and you're at a place where you're like, gosh, I've already done this, now what do I do? One of the first things I would do is I would sit down and look at your income and your spending and say, can I figure out a plan on my own to pay this off in the next 6 months? Maybe the next year. If you don't have that capacity to pay that off in that time frame and get yourself back on track, you need to go get help. Don't wait until it snowballs so much and you're being evicted. You need to go get help. And there's places you can reach out to. Unfortunately, there are predatory groups that will try and take your money again. But there are a lot of great charitable nonprofit organizations that will sit down with you and they'll help you figure out a plan and a pathway forward. Now, you can do it virtually. Some of those organizations will do things remote, but you need to sit down, show them all of your information, and they can help you.
And sometimes when they find themselves in those situations, they feel overwhelmed and they feel helpless. Call your bank and say, how much is my interest on this? How much is my interest on? Get all of those numbers, get the amounts, get the numbers, take the one that is the highest, amount. And then I would say, put as much money as you can towards the one that is taking the biggest gouge out of you. Just in the interim of you finding someone who can help you, a professional person, or like you said, one of these charities who can help you. And in the interim, while you may be waiting to hear back from one of those professional people or from a charity, you can actually be proactive, right? You can call up your bank, call up that lender, and start negotiating with them. Say, you know what, I would like to pay this off. What are the options? Maybe you have a certain type of credit card that gives you travel points and all of these other things, and it's because of these benefits of this card why you're at a 19%. And you could just switch it over to a card that has nothing, right? And you lower your rate to like 11%, right? Or even lower. So these are some things that you can do. Just be proactive, make that call, let them know what it is that you'd like to do, and you could get ahead that way too.
I think a lot of the monthly bills that we have, we often don't think about because we have it set up to come up automatically. And when it comes to our cell phone, our cable, internet, different products that we have that go into our account, on a minimum, an annual basis, you should be calling those people, you're the customer,
That's right.
and asking them for the best deal. Let's say you're paying $100 a month on your cell phone,
Yes.
you call them up and they lower that to you to $80.
That's
as
right.
soon as they do that, you go into your account and you take that $20
That's
and
right.
you set up now, that $20 you're not spending,
Don't spend it.
it's going into your
That's right.
savings. So
Yes.
all of a sudden you've just
Yes.
created a couple of extra
Yes.
$100 for
Yes.
yourself every year
Yeah.
by a phone call. It's a terrific way to make easy savings for you.
And not only savings, but if your goal is to get out of debt, everywhere that you're able to minimize the expense, right? You could take that money. So if you could even save $10 here and there and 20, you could be adding an extra $50, $70 to bring down that debt.
What happens with people too, I think, with needs versus wants is where I think people get caught up is something that's classified as a need, but we don't understand the level we should be doing it at.
Exactly.
So, rent. It'd be great to have an apartment with a doorman or something like that, but we have to look at, even though shelter is a need,
Yes.
what's the level that we can
Exactly.
afford? Transportation's a big one. Often when we look at our monthly budget, we say we're going to take the TTC or whatever public transit we have available, and then we end up getting up too late and taking an Uber to work.
Yes.
And it's important to say, where's an area here where am I getting value for this?
That's right.
If you have a job late at night and it's safer to take an Uber home,
Of course.
take the
Definitely.
Uber.
Yeah.
But if there's a less expensive way that you're able to accomplish the same outcome, that's a great spot to create more slack in your fixed budget.
We don't usually have that broken down for us, right? I mean, it should be, black and white, needs and wants, but there's so many gray areas. When it comes to specifically looking at our needs and wants, we really have to ask ourselves, well, what did I do to get that dollar? How much did I work to get that dollar, right? I took 8 hours, right, out of my day, and then I had to maybe travel an hour to get to that job or wherever it is that however I'm generating that income. So, now there's 10 hours out of my life that I had to use to bring this, paycheck. And then when you're gonna go spend that, think of that. Think of, well, if it's $50 a day that I earned, is that shirt worth all of the 10 hours of labor, that I've used? Like, that's literally what that shirt is, right? If you're getting paid $100 a day or $200 or $300, is that equivalent? Even your meal, you've worked so many hours to get that money, and then now you're sitting down and in one meal, it's gone. And it's not even gonna be enough to take you onto the night. You're gonna have to eat another sandwich
You
or
need a
something.
sack. Yes.
So we gotta really look at, like, is this a need or is this a want, right? And how much is it actually worth my life? That's how you were able to earn that income, right? You gave part of your life.
And I think values are really important when it comes to our finances, because if you have a financial life that reflects you, you're more likely to keep it going if it
Yes.
brings you joy,
That's right.
if it makes you feel good,
That's
if it
right.
makes you feel secure.
Yes.
And I encourage everyone to really formulate their own financial behaviors and habits that are going to help them long term. And I think too, when we're looking at the financial world that we live in, it has changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
When we're looking at any advice that older people are providing us, there's always a piece of knowledge there, but it might not translate into what their action was.
Yeah, that's true.
So take their knowledge, convert it into your today's lens, and then create your action plan.
Don't be afraid to do something different. A lot of people, I mean, we live in Canada, right? And there are a multitude of people who've come here from different places, right? And you may come from another country, and the way that it was done in your country with finances, or your parents' country, and this is what they know, and they've come over here, and they may be trying to do things the same way that they did it, back home, right? And so now you may be living in Canada, and it's a whole different ballgame, right? The finances, how finances are handled over here may be totally different. How taxes, how all these things are totally different. When looking at those who are older in our families, we have to also take that into consideration, right? That maybe they're coming from a different system.
Absolutely.
Right? And so now, having that conversation, we need to keep that in mind, right? That how is it done over here, though? Sometimes when it comes to talking about taxes, talking about investment, talking about finances on the whole, people tend to have an anxiety. The knowledge of finances, financial literacy, it's not something we're born with. We actually need to ask the questions. Many people get their paychecks and they don't even know where this money, CPP and this and that, what are all these, who is CPP, right? So they don't even have any idea. So, you know, my thing is never feel ashamed to ask questions. There is no question that is a bad question. The only thing wrong is when you have a question, you don't have an answer, and you're not asking it, right? Then you're still in the dark. Go ahead, ask those questions, find the person. Like you said, there's free tax clinics, and take advantage of everything that's free.